In this video, we're looking at the Mangala Sutta, verse 5. Bahu satchancha sippancha vinayocha susikkhitu subhasita chayavacha etam mangalam uttamam. And I'll call up the text. Here we are. Sorry. Bahu satchancha sippancha vinayocha susikkhitu Subhasita Chayavacha Etam Mangalam Uttamam. So this verse continues a list of desirable qualities. Bahu Satcha, much, the quality of being learned, great learning, much heardness. I'll call up iPad for you. Here we are. Oops. Bahu Satcha. First of all, don't confuse this satcha with the other much better known satcha, as in the Arya Satchani, the Noble Truths. That's satcha, which is from the equivalent of the Sanskrit satya, a truth. This is a derivative from the root shru, as I shall explain. So, let's go back to the Sanskrit. Bahu, same as Sanskrit and Pali, just equals much. From the root shru, to hear, we get the past participle shruta, and in the Pali sutta, as in evam maya suttam, thus have I heard. In Sanskrit, evam maya shrutam. Again, don't confuse this with sutta with a double T, which is in the suttas or the sutras, a different word. Sutta with a single ta, just means heard. Shruta. Now, you can make a compound adjective out of it, and that is, right in Sanskrit first, bahushruta, much heard. Literally, if you look at the words one by one, much heard. Now, shruta is the past participle of heard, but it can be used as a noun, like many past participles in Sanskrit, as that which has been heard. Now, in the old traditions, where the learning was mostly transmitted by word of mouth, the word shruta, that which had been heard, meant one's learning, because you acquired learning by hearing it. Rather like in modern English, we talk about somebody being well read, because a major part of our acquisition of formal learning is by reading nowadays. Back in ancient India, if they'd been speaking English, they'd have talked about somebody being well heard. He has heard much rather than he has read much. So, bahushruta is a possessive compound, like, long-legged as he whose legs are long. Bahushruta, he whose shruta is much. So bahushruta then becomes a possessive adjective. He whose shruta, learning, is much, therefore learned. Now, you can make an abstract noun out of that, as so often, by vriddhi of the first syllable, so bahu, and the final a becomes ya. So in Sanskrit now, the status or quality of having much learning as an abstract noun, learnedness, great learnedness, is bahushrutya. And it's the bahushrutya that in Pali becomes bahusatcha. Bahusatcha. So bahusatchancha, sippancha. Sippa in Sanskrit it's in Sanskrit it's shilpa is generally means a craft or a trade, an acquired skill, typically in the form of a handicraft. And it's, I don't know whether to correctly say likely or possible, but it has been linked to the Proto-Indo-European root um, kel or kelp. By the way, you very often find that an S um, turns up at the beginning of a word or drops from the beginning of a word in its migrations from Proto-Indo-European through the various Indo-European languages. So um, it's quite possible that it was a skippa or skippa in a more primitive form of Vedic, and the kurt dropped, leaving shilpa. And incidentally, the kurt to sh is a frequent mutation anyway between in Proto-Indo-European and Vedic. So query then whether it is cognate, and I tend to think it is, but we can't prove it yet, with the Latin root sculpt, which of course in English we have a sculptor and a sculpture, and the original meaning then in Latin was carving, the skill of carving, typically I suppose in stone or marble or wood. Um, so as where in Latin it became specialized into what we know now in modern English as sculpture, the same word, or what is likely to have been the same word in Sanskrit and Pali, has a more general meaning of a trade, and um, most likely I would think to have been a handicraft, a skill or a trade. So that's how we get shilpa in Sanskrit, which then becomes sippa in Pali. So bahusachancha sippancha. So the idea is these blessings are being learned with learning that you've taken in specifically in the context we're looking at here by hearing, bahusutta, um, sipancha, and so to be learned and to have a skill, a handicraft skill or trade. Vinayocha susikkito. Vinaya, well, we know that as the monastic rules. The It's from the root ni. I've done a note on it in the written text. It's from our root ni, meaning to lead, and with the separative prefix vi, literally meaning to lead away. And it makes its a verbal noun in naya, and therefore with vi it becomes the vinaya, literally the leading away. And the idea of the vinaya, which is the rules of conduct, is that it either leads you away from wrongdoing and vice, or takes the wrongdoing and vice away from you. Um, we have in the Karanyametta Sutta, um, Kamesu Vinaya Gedham. Vinaya is the absolute form, taking or having taken away. So Kamesu Vinaya Gedham, having removed Gedham, greed or covetousness, Kamesu, for sense pleasures. That's the same Vinaya here. In the context of this verse, Vinayocha Susikhito, um, clearly it means a path of discipline, the rules of discipline, or generally the rules of proper moral conduct. Susikhito, um, Susikhito, well studied, well learnt. We have our root. Oops, sorry, my iPad's gone a bit funny again. Oops, let's try and sort this out. Come on, iPad. Try again. That's better. Shiksha. And it makes more than one verbal. One of the verbal nouns, looking at the Sanskrit forms now, of course, one of the verbal nouns is just to add an a to the end. Shiksha, which means learning or training. Um, Past participle, shikshita, which means learnt, that which has been learned or studied. And in, so if something that has been well learnt, well studied, it is in Sanskrit is sushikshita. So that is what becomes in Pali susikhita. I'll write it in both. Susik. So sushikshita, Sanskrit. Oops, sorry, I missed an H out there. My fault. Susikhita, well studied. A well studied rules of discipline or rules of conduct, code of conduct. Vinayocha susikhito. Incidentally, from that same root we get shishya in Sanskrit, which means a student. You sometimes find in the modern languages of northern India that the retroflex sh occasionally turns up in the languages of northern India as a k. So the shishya is what turns up in Punjabi as the Sikhs, because they are the Sikhs, the shishya, the students, the disciples, the pupils of Guru Nanak. So that's the meaning of the word Sikh. And in fact, in modern Hindi, um, the word for to learn is sikhna. By the way, the ending na is simply the infinitive ending in modern Hindi. So sikhna is to learn, and of course the Sikh, the Sikhs. So vinayocha susikhito, subhasita chayavacha. That's easy enough. We have our root vach to speak. As you know, that's the one that's cognate with the Latin vox, from which we have vocal. Vox, voice in Latin, it came into French as la voix, and via its French form into English as voice. So vox, la voix, voice in Italian, la voce, um, and in Spanish, voz. As so often, it makes its verbal noun. As so often there are various ways you can make a verbal noun from a root. In this particular way, we have vacha, just meaning speech, the act of speaking, giving voice, voicing something, vacha. Subhashita, so I said that in Sanskrit, subhasita chaya vacha. It's from a, oops, I'm trying to turn the page here. Just won't let me turn the page. Come on. How very odd. Oh, there we are. Right. So we've got the root bhash, meaning to speak. And in Pali, that turns up, as we'd expect, as bhas. So subhashita, in Pali, subhasita, simply means well spoken, not well spoken in the sense of like well spoken, speaking nicely, but that speech which is spoken well, presumably in line with the moral rules governing speech. Musavada veramani sikapadam samadhyami. And take the training rule to avoid wrong speech. So the syntax of the sentence subhasita chayavacha, the writer could equally have written subhasita vacha, well spoken words nicely spoken. But here, subhasita chayavacha, what's this? What's the force of yavacha? Okay, ya, we have it's the relative pronoun, here relative adjectival pronoun. Your, which, that which, it's masculine singular. Ya is simply the feminine form of it. Yavacha, which speech, or in English we'd say well-spoken speech, or that speech which is well-spoken. Now, that speech which is well-spoken means effectively the same thing as well-spoken speech. But just a slightly more long-winded way of putting it, but you very frequently do that in Pali without, I think, sounding too long-winded. So yavacha, that speech, which, literally which speech in Pali, in English we'd put into that speech which. So the speech which is well-spoken. So subhasita chayavacha, that speech which is subhasita, which is well spoken, or words nicely spoken, speech well uttered. And then etam mangalamuttamam. Again, that's the etam mangalamuttamam is the recurring refrain in this verse. So I'll come back to the. We've lost our text boxes again. See if I can get them back. See if I can get them back. Yeah, I got them back. So I'll read it again before we finish this video. Bahu sachancha sipancha vinayo cha susikhito subhasita chaya vacha etam mangalam uttamam. And once more. Bahu sachancha sipancha vinayocha susikhito subhasita chayavacha etam mangalamuttamam. And that's it on this video.